The moment you open your mouth to explain yourself, you have already surrendered leverage. Consider the instant an accusation lands, not always dramatic, often subtle. A remark at a dinner table, a skeptical look in a meeting, a partner twisting a sentence you said yesterday into a new meaning today. You feel the surge in your chest, your body heating as if you have been cornered. Biology activates before philosophy can intervene. Your pulse accelerates, your breath shortens, and a single urgent impulse dominates your thinking: correct the misunderstanding immediately. You begin clarifying, layering context, constructing timelines, presenting motives. In that precise moment, you have stepped onto a stage you did not build, under lights you do not control, performing a role you did not choose. Because people rarely judge you by the objective truth of your words. They judge you by the emotional posture behind them. The one who explains appears to seek permission. The one who justifies appears to request approval. Defense is interpreted not as evidence of innocence but as evidence of dependence. Social perception is brutal and ancient. Long before written law, tribes evaluated status by composure. The individual who remained calm under challenge was assumed to possess authority. The individual who rushed to prove innocence appeared to be asking the group for validation. Power has always followed the person who defines reality rather than the person who argues about it. The deeper principle is not correctness. It is framing. Whoever establishes the interpretive frame determines the outcome. The instant you defend yourself, you have accepted the other person's narrative as the courtroom and yourself as the accused. You are no longer deciding the conversation. You are reacting to it. And reaction, in social hierarchies, signals lower position. But imagine an alternative. Imagine the accusation arrives and you do the single behavior most destabilizing to a manipulator. You refuse to emotionally enter the conflict they prepared for you. Most individuals move through life tethered to other people's reactions. A raised eyebrow produces apology. A sharp tone produces justification. An accusation produces explanation. They spend enormous energy proving they are good, competent, reasonable, worthy. It becomes exhausting, a slow erosion of identity because your sense of self depends on continuous external approval. There exists another way of moving through interactions, a state so grounded internally that hostility cannot penetrate it. Insults lose their impact not because you counter them, but because they fail to land. This is not indifference, and it is not cruelty. It is relocation of authority. Instead of deriving your sense of reality from the approval of observers, you derive it from internal certainty. When that shift occurs, the accusation does not trigger panic, it triggers observation. You stop rushing to repair perceptions and begin watching behavior. The conversation transforms from a battle you must win into information you can analyze. To understand why this is difficult, you must examine biology. Human nervous systems evolved in environments where exclusion from the group meant death. Therefore, misunderstanding feels dangerous at a primitive level. When someone questions your character, your brain interprets it as social exile. Stress hormones spike, and the mind pushes you to repair belonging quickly. Explanation becomes a survival reflex. Yet modern interactions rarely determine survival. The reflex persists long after the necessity has disappeared. Childhood reinforced this pattern. As a child, authority figures determined consequences. The only escape from punishment was explanation. You learn to defend yourself to regain safety. That conditioning remains active even when speaking to peers, colleagues, strangers, or adversaries. You unconsciously elevate them into judges and yourself into a pleading defendant. The statement you believe is, "I want you to understand me." The signal you transmit is, "You hold authority over my self-worth." Human perception is sensitive to this dynamic. People detect the subtle posture of seeking acceptance. When you hurry to justify, you reveal that your stability depends on their agreement. Once someone perceives that dependency, they possess leverage. They can provoke reactions repeatedly because they know the correct emotional button. Respect follows a different path than understanding. Many believe clarity earns respect. Often the opposite occurs. Excessive explanation communicates insecurity. Stable authority does not narrate itself. When you begin producing long arguments, presenting evidence, revisiting past conversations, you unintentionally announce that the other person's opinion can alter your internal state. You have handed them access to your psychological space. A common trap emerges. You believe if you articulate your reasoning perfectly, the accuser will admit error. Rarely does this occur, because many accusations are not searches for truth. They are probes for reaction. The moment you react intensely, the test is answered. The issue was never the event, the issue was influence. The first transformation towards psychological independence is recognizing that the imagined courtroom exists only in your perception. There is no universal judge listening to the exchange. There are only perspectives. When you stop assigning others the role of arbiter, their statements shift from verdicts into opinions. Opinions lose their power when you stop treating them as rulings. Now consider what occurs when you refuse immediate defense. A person delivers a criticism. Instead of rushing to counter it, you hold steady eye contact and remain silent for several seconds. Silence in conflict produces discomfort because social scripts collapse. The attacker expected rebuttal. Instead, they encounter stillness. The human mind seeks equilibrium, so they begin filling the space themselves. They soften their accusation, clarify, justify, or question their own tone. Without speaking, you have altered the balance. The conversation now orbits your composure rather than their accusation. Silence is not emptiness. It is a mirror. When someone speaks aggressively and receives no emotional reaction, they hear their own hostility more clearly. Their words echo back amplified. Many will retreat, moderate, or reinterpret. You did not defeat them verbally. You allowed them to confront themselves. Maintaining this composure is difficult because your ego demands expression. The urge to respond feels unbearable. Yet the most stable presence in any room is the person who does not reveal every internal reaction. Defense exposes vulnerabilities. If you protest intelligence, observers suspect insecurity about intelligence. If you protest morality, they suspect insecurity about character. Silence reveals nothing and therefore grants nothing to exploit. Sometimes silence alone is insufficient. Words may be necessary, but they need not be defensive. Instead of resisting the force of accusation, you redirect it. When confronted with an exaggerated claim, you lightly exaggerate further. By leaning into the accusation humorously or neutrally, you remove its sting. You demonstrate that the label cannot injure you because it does not define you. The seriousness dissolves, and with it the attacker's leverage. The interaction shifts from confrontation into absurdity, and absurdity cannot sustain hostility. Amused composure communicates high internal stability. It signals that your identity is not negotiable. When you react intensely, you descend into the emotional level of the confrontation. When you remain calm, you observe it from above. People instinctively trust and often follow the person who appears emotionally anchored. Another layer of interaction exists beneath words. Every conversation contains roles. One asks questions and evaluates, the other answers and explains. The questioner assumes authority. When you continuously answer accusations, you reinforce their authority. You can disrupt this structure by redirecting attention. Instead of defending your behavior, examine theirs. Ask what motivates the concern, what reaction they expected, or why the issue matters so intensely. You have shifted from defendant to observer. This redirection does not require aggression. It requires curiosity. You are not attacking, you are reframing. The focus moves from proving your innocence to understanding the dynamic. Many manipulators become uncomfortable when examined because their influence depends on you remaining reactive rather than reflective. By calmly analyzing the interaction, you exit the emotional arena and enter the analytical one. At its core, this philosophy rests on a simple realization: other people's interpretations do not define your reality. Their emotions are theirs to manage. When you defend excessively, you attempt to carry feelings that are not yours. You assume responsibility for perceptions you cannot fully control. Releasing that burden creates psychological space. There exists a paradoxical strategy within this approach. Sometimes the most disarming response is partial agreement. When someone attacks aggressively, calm acknowledgement of factual elements removes their momentum. Without resistance, their energy dissipates. They prepared for conflict. You provided acceptance of reality without accepting the insult attached to it. You own the action, not the identity imposed on you. Admitting error without defensiveness signals deep confidence. Insecure individuals deny minor mistakes because they fear identity damage. Secure individuals correct errors immediately because their identity is not threatened by imperfection. Observers recognize the difference instinctively. However, techniques alone are insufficient. Tone, posture, and presence communicate more than words. If you repeat these responses while internally desperate for approval, the incongruence appears. Real effectiveness comes from internal work. Accusations hurt most when they touch a fear you secretly hold about yourself. When you confront your own imperfections honestly, external labels lose power. If someone claims something completely untrue about you, you feel amusement, not injury. But when criticism resembles a private doubt, you react strongly. Therefore, the ultimate defense is self-knowledge. Accept your strengths and flaws deliberately. When you no longer hide from yourself, others cannot expose you. A person who has accepted personal complexity cannot be easily shamed. Transparency replaces defensiveness. You are no longer a fortress guarding secrets, but an open landscape. Words pass through without impact. This state is often described as psychological untouchability. It does not mean invulnerability to pain, it means freedom from manipulation. For practice, adopt a temporary discipline. For several days, avoid unnecessary explanations. If you make a mistake, acknowledge it simply without narrative. If misunderstood, allow space before correcting. Observe your impulses carefully. You will feel discomfort because you are withdrawing from a lifelong habit of perception management. Remain steady and watch the reactions around you. People often respond first with confusion, then with curiosity, eventually with a form of respect that arises from predictability and calmness. Humans gravitate toward individuals whose sense of self does not fluctuate with opinion. By conserving energy previously spent on justification, you reclaim attention for meaningful action. The environment will attempt to pull you back into reactive patterns because reactions are predictable and engaging. Resist the pull. Maintain composure, maintain brevity, maintain presence. Mystery increases influence because certainty attracts attention. When you stop constantly explaining your existence, your words gain weight. Silence becomes part of your communication, and your communication becomes deliberate rather than compulsive. You move from seeking acceptance to establishing presence. The shift is subtle externally but profound internally. You cease operating as someone awaiting evaluation and begin operating as someone participating by choice. The difference is not loud, but it is unmistakable. The world responds differently to those who no longer negotiate their identity in every conversation.